Hi guys, here is Dr. Benaduce. Let's start studying the skeleton. The human skeleton consists of all bones found in the human body. And an adult has 206 bones. Now, if we look at the number of bones in a child, there are many more than 206 bones. And that's because some bones fuse together during childhood and during adolescence. And then when we reach adulthood, we don't have as many bones as we had as a child. And traditionally, we divide the skeleton into axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is in the vertical central axis of the body. So all the bones that we have here in the vertical central axis of the body is making up the axial skeleton. In appendicular skeleton, the word appendicular makes a reference to appendages. So we are talking about the bones that make up our upper limbs and lower limbs, and also the bones that connect our upper and lower limbs to the central axis, to the axial skeleton. In our skeleton, so all these bones forming the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton, they form this frame. They form this supporting structure of our body. And all the other organs, all the other structures in our body are placed on top of this frame or within the frame. And when we look at each of these bones making up our skeleton, we see that each bone has a particular function. And that function is dependent on the size, the shape, and also the strength of that bone. So for instance, if we pay attention to the bones that are in our lower back, and also bones that are part of our lower limbs, we can notice that they are thicker because they need to be very strong to support our body weight. Also, as we looked before, our bones have surface markings. So our bones have details, and those details, they have a purpose. And the size, the shape of that specific detail gives us the heads up of what that structure, that specific detail in the bone is for. For example, if we look at a bone and we find a very prominent, robust muscle attachment point, that tells us that that specific bone surface marking is the attachment point for a very powerful muscle. And if we look at another surface marking that also serves as a muscle attachment point, so a point at which a muscle will attach to the bone, but we don't see that as prominent, as big, that tells us that that specific muscle attaching to that bone is not as strong as the other one. So now that we'll go over the axial and appendicular skeleton, it will be very helpful if you keep in mind that the size of the bone, the surface markings we are looking in that bone, the shape of the bone, are all related to the function that bone has. And if you keep this in mind when we are looking at every single bone, you will see that the topic will become much more interesting than just listing a bunch of names for each of the bones in the axial and appendicular skeleton. So let's get started.